morning and Tashidelek, and a very warm welcome to the 5th Geneva Forum, which is organized jointly by Department of Information and International Relations, Central Tibetan Administration, and Tibet Bureau, Geneva. I am Tenzin Shesang from Tibet Bureau, Geneva. The 5th Geneva Forum theme, Human Rights in Decline, Region under China. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Now we begin with the inaugural session with welcoming our Minister, Kale Nonzi Domala, Minister of Department of Information and International Relations, Central Tibetan Administration. And we have Mr. Tenzin Lekshila, Additional Secretary of Department of Information and International Relations, Central Tibetan Administration. And I would like to request Mr. Tenzin Lekshila to please welcome the gathering.
Good morning, all. Thank you. I expect that. So I would like to welcome our Honorable Minister, Kalun Nonsdomala, and all the distinguished speakers over here from all over the world, and our participants who are gathered over here to participate in the Geneva Forum 2023. This year, Geneva Forum 2023, the title is about decline of human rights in China. And as we all know, that China aspires to rise above anybody else, but at the same time, suppression is all over the places. So therefore, it is a high time for us to speak about the suppressions, the repressions, the tortures, and all these things for everybody to understand about the reality of what's happening inside China. So this session is not just particularly about Tibet, even though the Department of Information and International Relations of the Central Tibetan Administration and the Office of Tibet in Geneva host this. This is the 5th one. Our main idea is not just talk about Tibet. Our main idea is to talk about everybody which concerns about human rights inside Tibet. So therefore, we have a distinguished panels from different backgrounds. Some are from media, some from experts, some are from activist backgrounds, from different backgrounds, who knows about the reality of what's really happening inside Tibet, and then to speak about the truth. So therefore, I will not take much time. So on behalf of the host, right, I would like to welcome everyone over here. And we have 4 different themes. Today we have 2 themes, and tomorrow we have 2 themes. Then we have a valedictory. So I hope that you'll be more enlightened. I hope that this session will gives you more empowered to speak about the reality and the truth about what's happening in China. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Tenzin Lekshila, for welcoming the gathering. And next, due to some circumstances, our guest for the forum, Isabel Pasca, couldn't make to attend the forum, but we have another Honorable Mr. Nicholas Walter, who is able to send a video message for the gathering.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I'm very sad not being able to be with you today, but unfortunately I have to stay in Bern for a committee in the Parliament. Anyway, I'm very glad to have the opportunity to address to you a few words for the opening of the Geneva Forum 2023. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers, of course, for this very important forum. It is important because it is more than ever necessary to analyze and discuss the situation of the human rights in the region under Chinese authority. A situation of the human rights that is clearly becoming more and more preoccupying as increasing reports of human rights abuses in China are published. Tibetans, Uyghurs, but also political opponents, social leaders, or environmental activists are the victims of the autocratic Chinese regime that do not hesitate anymore to openly contest the international order and law. As member of the parliamentary and co-president of the Tibetan Switzerland Interparliamentary Group, I'm deeply concerned by this situation. All the more so as this situation is tending even to get worse. That's why our parliamentary group is working hard to make Switzerland being more engaged towards supporting the Tibetans and all minorities here in Switzerland and in the regions under Chinese authority. In the name of the parliamentary group, Tibet Switzerland, I would like to warmly thank you for your contribution and your involvement for more human rights respect in China. It's only the addition of all our actions that may bring respect, freedom and protection to all the populations in the region. You can count on me and on the parliamentary group for that. Thank you very much. Have a fruitful forum in Geneva, and long live le Tibet. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank Ms. Honorable Nicholas Walter for sending his messages and being the instrument for bringing the agenda of Tibet and human rights violation in Tibet in Swiss Parliament. I would like to thank him again. And next, we have again Mr. Honorable Arunas Walinskas, Member of Parliament Lithuania, who couldn't make to attend the forum, but we have his video message.
Honorable ladies and gentlemen, Teshidelik, I hope that this message finds you well. Unfortunately, I cannot join you today in Geneva, but I'm with you in spirit in the pursuit of common goals. I'm certain that present in Geneva today are a great many experts whose professional and academic expertise far exceed mine, so I hope you do not mind if I approach this from a more personal perspective. This year, I was fortunate enough to be able to visit the tenacious Tibetan community in exile in Dharamsala, as well as to meet their leader, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. For me as a Lithuanian, this was a trip of personal gratitude, among other things. While Soviet Union was in throes of collapse, it was precisely His Holiness the Dalai Lama who, on behalf of the Tibetan people, was the very first world leader to express his support for my people's struggle for liberty and freedom. A leader of a people who at that time did not even have their own independent state, who themselves were in a battle for their own freedom. Yet a leader who had the compassion and the courage to express his support for which we will always be grateful. In Dharamsala, I met many people who, like myself, were born under occupation. I was embraced by a kind, warm-hearted, and generous community, which gave all that it had and more. The stories we shared, the insights we exchanged, were illuminating. I realized that despite our differences, and obviously there were many, we share some similarities. Just like us, Lithuanians, and other minority nations of the former Soviet Union, the Tibetans, as well as other peoples of China, were being told that they were being liberated while they were being subjugated, that their countries were being developed, while in truth they were being looted, that they should be grateful instead of bitter, that they should be accepting instead of resisting. It was rather ironic to see that the embattled Tibetan community in Dharamsala had much more appreciation for democracy, freedom, human rights than China, which still to this day claims that it is liberating Tibet as well as other regions from the shackles of superstition, theocracy, and primitivity. The name of truth is Tibet. This was an essay by one of the most famous modern Lithuanian philosophers, Leonidas Donskis, who sadly passed away 7 years ago and left a massive void in our intellectual landscape. So what is that truth? The truth is that the Tibetans, they're not an ethnic minority. They are a nation. They are a people. The truth, among other things, is that Tibet is not an autonomous region. It is a state, it is a country that decides to have the right to choose its path for itself. The truth is that all empires fall due to their internal inconsistencies, inside and outside pressure, and other factors. In my closing remarks in one of my speeches in Dharamsala, I encourage the Tibetan community there to think of itself as a soil and the actions of individuals as seeds which will sprout and which will grow into full democracy for Tibet and other regions of China. I also encourage them to take heart because their struggle and their efforts were not just their own. They were being observed and supported by a great many friends in the West and all around the world. And this event is proof that that was not mere talk. Ladies and gentlemen, the Tibetans as well as other oppressed peoples of China are doing their part. More than that, I believe. We must make sure that we do ours. The battle may seem an uphill one, and honestly sometimes it is. But if I, as well as some of my colleagues from the former Soviet Union, the former empire of evil, could stand there in Dharamsala and address the Tibetans and everyone there as free citizens, then justice is attainable. I wish you all fruitful discussions and best of luck in the upcoming days. Thank you.
I would like to thank Mr. Honorable Arunas Wallinkas, Member of Parliament, Ludhiana, for sending his video message. Thank you. Next, may I request our Honorable colleague, Minister Nonzi Tomla, to kindly address the gathering.
Mitrashtile, and on behalf of the Central Tibetan Administration, and especially from the Department of Information and International Relations, in conjunction with the Tibet Bureau Office of Geneva, I would like to extend greetings to all of you, present here, our distinguished speakers, Honorable Member of Parliaments, respected representatives of the offices of Tibet to London, Brussels, and our Paris coordinator, and respected community leaders, Tibetan community leaders from Tibetan associations and Tibetan NGOs, and also our longtime friends and supporters from Europe, representing Tibet support groups, and to the 17 Tibetan youths, from different parts of Europe, who have taken the time and also the initiative to attend this 5th Geneva Forum. So I thank you all for your presence here. So with this August gathering of experts, scholars, activists, advocates, defenders, practitioners, parliamentarians, policymakers, community leaders, and students, we consider the Geneva Forum to be a great platform and also a great opportunity for all of us to network, to deliberate, and also to collaborate, and also to strategize on spotlighting on the critical human rights situation of different regions under the authoritarian and totalitarian regime and rule of the People's Republic of China. So this Geneva Forum is happening against the backdrop of the United Nations Universal Periodic Review of China's human rights record for the past 4 years. And it is upon us who live in free countries of the world to speak up for them and to make every effort to right the wrongs and to hold the perpetrators accountable in order to make them or to transform them into a responsible global stakeholder. So the CCP, under the leadership of the President Xi Jinping, has been increasingly engaged in an aggressive and assertive behavior, which is not only threatening the regional security and peace, but also the international rules-based order and the democratic values that we all share. So I was recently participating in the recently concluded 27th conference of the Forum 2000, which was held in Prague. So in one of the sessions, I was captivated listening to the very powerful speech that Mr. Larry Diamond gave on democracy and authoritarianism. And as you all know very well, Larry is a leading contemporary scholar on democratic studies. So what resonated the most with me of his speech is the commonality of themes like legitimacy crisis and immense fear over the loss of political power and control that characterizes authoritarian regimes like China, Russia, and many other countries in this world. So these elements drive the authoritarian regimes to employ multiple tools of repressive measures domestically, and also to engage in aggressive foreign policy behavior and influence operations in order to enforce and also to secure legitimacy at all levels. So, so the PRC government at this time is facing legitimacy deficit in Tibet, Taiwan, Hong Kong, East Turkestan, Manchuria, Inner Mongolia, and many other regions where the resistance movements and activities still persist in different forms and in different degrees. And as expected out of an authoritarian regime like China, China's policy response to these persecuted groups have been one of stability maintenance. So this is crushing dissent, monopolizing every means of public expression that contradicts the official CCP's position, governance, and policies, and also ensuring compliance to CCP's rule and legitimacy. Therefore, it is the human rights violations in China is symptomatic of larger issues, including legitimacy crisis. And if I am to contextualize the case of Tibet, because the central theme of the 5th Geneva Forum is Human Rights in Decline, Regions under China. So if I may contextualize the case of Tibet within that. So it is noteworthy that Tibetan freedom struggle movement is one of the longest running non-violent freedom struggle movement of our contemporary times. So in this day and age, where politics of reciprocity and economic interests dictates the flow and rhythm of international relations and its diplomacy, the continued existence and relevance of Tibet can only be attributed to the strong moral leadership and visionary leadership of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the indomitable determination of Tibetans inside Tibet, despite all odds, the resilient spirit of the exiled Tibetan community, and the unwavering support of our supporters and friends of Tibet. And most importantly, the element of truth, justice, and dialogue, which defines and characterizes the Tibetan freedom struggle movement, has led to its existence, sustenance so far, and which is, I think, all due to the ethical leadership of His Holiness the Dalai Lama in this conflict-ridden and interest-driven world. So there is this very famous book, The Power of the Powerless, which is by late Czech President Václav Havel, where Václav Havel had explained on the importance and meaning of living in truth as being crucial to breaking the chains of totalitarianism. So, coming back to Tibet, the Sino-Tibet conflict is still unresolved, and the present situation inside Tibet is being described by Human Rights Watchdog as giant open prison. And Freedom House has consistently listed Tibet as the least free nation for the last 5 years. And since the invasion and occupation of Tibet by the People's Republic of China, China has systematically implemented radical policies that is causing large-scale assault on Tibetan culture and Tibetan identity, leading to some of the observers to say that the current condition of Tibet is similar to facing cultural genocide. And the level of repression inside Tibet is very much evident from the fact that we have had, as of now, since 2009, 157 known cases of Tibetans who have self-immolated or burned themselves to death in protest against China's oppressive rule and policies. And in terms of Tibetan Buddhism, PRC authorities consider Tibetan Buddhism as a source of challenge to their state legitimacy because of its strong identification with Tibetan culture and Tibetan identity. So there is a lot of state interference in religious affairs, from implementation of patriotic re-education campaign, anti-Dalai Lama campaign, indoctrination, syncretization, interference in reincarnation system. So all these have reduced the space and scope for the practice of Tibetan Buddhism. And the Beijing's efforts to appropriate and control the reincarnation system is seen by many as an issue of legitimacy and authority over Tibet and Tibetans. So in 2011, His Holiness the Dalai Lama has released a written document which clearly reaffirmed that His Holiness has the sole legitimate authority over the reincarnation process of the 15th Dalai Lama. So with that document, that is the most authoritative document we have had from our side. So that document denies the CCP any future legitimacy and any agency to interfere in the selection and recognition of the 15th Dalai Lama. So we have another classic case of China's interference in reincarnation system, and that is the case of Panchen Rinpoche, Gendin Chögyal Nyima, who has been held incommunicado since 1995. And despite international pressure, repeated requests for access, the Chinese authorities have refused to establish his health, his whereabouts, and his well-being. And now, as a part of legitimacy building exercise, including extensive use of Sinicization efforts, Tibet Action Institute has reported that nearly 1 million Tibetan children from the age of 4 to 18 have been forcibly put up in colonial-style residential schools all across Tibet in order to be Sinicized, to be indoctrinated, and to be de-Tibetanized. So this kind of assimilationist approach to education and PRC's fundamental emphasis on building socialist state with Chinese characteristics is causing alienation and extermination of Tibetan culture and Tibetan identity. And in terms of ecological concerns and flawed development policies inside Tibet, Tibet, as you know, is commonly referred to as the third pole, the roof of the world, the water tower of Asia, because Tibet has the largest ice mass containing 46,000 glaciers. So over 1.4 billion people from the global population depends on Tibet's water system for food, security, agriculture, transportation, and fisheries. And in terms of development programs that are being implemented inside Tibet, it is very concerning that all these development programs are being formulated and implemented without taking into consideration proper environmental assessment, and also without the participation of the local community stakeholders. So what we say is that China's investment and development policies and programs inside Tibet has been devoid of the need-based approach and the right-based approach, because Tibetans have no say in the decision-making processes that impacts their lives, and they have no participatory power to engage in the implementation process. And it is a fact that China has invested lots of money into developing Tibet, but the nature of development, the development for whom, and also the nature of development, the lopsided and overriding focus on hard infrastructure, that is building roads, railways, dams, these have not upgraded, improved, or benefited the lives of Tibetan population overall in terms of the sectors such as education and healthcare. So not only that, and then China is very sophisticated in employing deceptive methods and coercive methods to influence the international information environment, public discourse, and official narrative. So right now, China's information manipulation tactics include propaganda, one. Second is disinformation. And third, censorship. Even President Xi Jinping has directed his state media to tell the China story well so that the global community can be positively influenced. And on Tibet, China's disinformation tactic can be fundamentally targeted at countering Tibet's historical status as an independent nation before the PRC's invasion and occupation, and instead of that, propagating alternative narrative of Tibet being a part of China since antiquity, and forcing the international community to accept this narrative. And there have been efforts to undermine the image and also the reputation of His Holiness the Dalai Lama in order to shape international perception as part of the disinformation campaign. And in terms of surveillance strategy, in Tibet and also in East Turkestan, the traditional security surveillance apparatus of military, police, neighborhood spies, these are being extensively used. And in addition, in recent times, modern security surveillance technologies are also being used to surveil the people and their movements. And reports by Citizen Lab and by Human Rights Watch have found that over 1.2 million Tibetans were subjected to arbitrary and mass forcible collection of DNA samples, which may be abused for surveillance purpose in the future. And China conducts the most sophisticated and global campaign of transnational repression. And under that campaign, it actively seeks to interfere, intimidate, and harass people who live outside of China, and particularly those who have been politically active. So it is reported that Chinese, Tibetans, Inner Mongolians, Hong Kongers, in 36 different countries are being subjected to China's transnational repression. And Freedom House has labeled China as the most prolific perpetrator of transnational repression. So what can we do? And what can we prioritize effectively to counter the China challenge? So on a governmental level, it is important that the foreign policy priorities are based on the rule of law, human rights, and democracy. And then whatever support that international community has, for example, for Tibet and other persecuted groups, be institutionalized in legislative acts, like the US Tibet Policy and Support Act. And then it is important and imperative that common alliances be formed of like-minded partners based on common liberal values, common democratic agenda, and common persecution concerns. And it is also important that governments hold China responsible and accountable for any misdeeds and misuse of power, both at the bilateral engagement level and also at multilateral forums like the United Nations. And it is also important that we prevent the revisionist and expansionist agenda of authoritarian regimes like China and Russia to influence the international norms and standard setting. And it is also important to engender the culture, significance, and relevance of negotiation and dialogue as the way forward to resolve international conflicts, including the Sino-Tibet conflict. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama has repeatedly emphasized over the years that it is unrealistic to expect unity and stability under brute force. So in order to achieve harmonious society within China, harmonious society within Tibet, within Taiwan, Hong Kong, East Turkestan, Inner Mongolia, Manchuria, and other persecuted nations, communities, and groups, it is highly important that there is a clear need and urgency to first of all acknowledge and then to address the core concerns and fundamental grievances of the affected people. Many human needs theorists believe that conflict over needs are fundamentally different from conflict over interest, because interests are negotiable, needs are non-negotiable. So for example, in Tibet, protests happen. Protest continues to happen. And these protests are fundamentally, essentially pleas by the Tibetans to let Tibetans be Tibetan and allow them the space and right to express their Tibetanness in their own land. So this is a fundamental need. So it is proven beyond doubt that propaganda, brute force, development incentive cannot be the ultimate answer to many of the unresolved conflict issues that are currently remaining unresolved. So I hope that political will and wisdom will prevail on authoritarian regimes like China and Russia, and that we look forward to more positive change within China and also resolution to the Sino-Tibet conflict based on the middle way policy, because CTA is fundamentally and firmly committed to the dialogue process to negotiate with the Chinese counterpart in resolving the Sino-Tibet conflict. So, and then we also hope and pray that our brothers and sisters in Taiwan, Hong Kong, East Turkestan, Mongolia, and Manchuria, we all have more freedom and more peace in the years to come. And I really thank you so much for your attention and for your presence, and very much look forward to your insightful presentations, expert deliberations, and hopefully an action-oriented declaration at the end of this forum. So I thank you all so very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nonzidomala. And next, I would like to request Ms. Rixin Gekhang Chede, representative of Office of Tibet Brussels, to kindly deliver a word of thanks.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and dear friends. Tashidele, bonjour, and good morning. As was introduced, my name is Rixin Gekhang, and I'm the representative of His Holiness the Dalai Lama to the EU, Western Europe, and the Maghreb. I have also been additionally assigned the portfolio of the Tibet Bureau Geneva during the absence of my counterpart. I have therefore the honor and privilege to deliver the vote of thanks for the inaugural session of the 5th Geneva Forum, an event focusing on human rights. At the outset, I would like to express my profound gratitude to our special guests, Mr. Arinas Valinskas, Member of Parliament from Lithuania, and Mr. Nicholas Walder, Member of Parliament from Switzerland, for their video messages. We regret that they couldn't be here, but we are very grateful for the video message and for their continued commitment to support the Tibetan issue. I would also like to acknowledge the presence of Ambassador Nicole Su from the Cultural Economic Delegation of Taipei to Switzerland. We are very grateful for your presence. Thank you very much, and we look forward to hearing from you tomorrow. I would like to convey our sincere thanks to the Honorable Minister of the Department of Information and International Relations of the Central Tibetan Administration, Ms. Nonzi Domla, for her constant support and encouragement for this event. I also take this opportunity to extend our gratitude to the distinguished panel of speakers, participants, and guests for participating at the event. We are also grateful to the Additional Secretary of the Department of Information and International Relations and the spokesperson of the Central Tibetan Administration, Mr. Tenzin Lekshila, for his meticulous guidance in making this event happen. I would also like to thank my counterpart, Mr. Sonam Frasi, representative of His Holiness the Dalai Lama to the UK, Ireland, Northern Europe, Poland, and Baltics, and my colleague, Mr. Thupten Siring, coordinator, Bureau du Tibet Paris, for their presence. Lastly, I thank all my colleagues who have been involved in this particular exercise for the last many months. Without their full support, this conference would not have been possible. Thank you all once again for your presence, and we look forward to an extremely productive two-day discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Rigzinla. And next, we have a coffee break, networking coffee break. After that, I would like to request everybody to be here on 11:30. Thank you.